Before Bryan Adams was a household name, selling millions of records and headlining stadium tours, he was a Canadian rocker with a string of hits and a burning ambition. But even as his star was rising, nobody could have predicted the monumental success that awaited him in 1991. A seemingly simple ballad penned for a major motion picture would not only top the charts worldwide, but it became a cultural phenomenon. But the success also came with some surprising headaches and controversy, including a political firestorm over a controversial politician appropriating the song, as well as Adams battling with his own record label and the Canadian government, who deemed that he wasn't Canadian enough. The whole story is coming up today on Rock and Roll True Stories. Before we get started, be sure to hit the bell notification icon and put all notifications on. I hear from a lot of my subscribers that they don't even get notifications when I post my videos. I would greatly appreciate if you guys did that. In addition to, of course, watching my videos and sharing my content. Bryan Adams' journey to musical stardom began in the early 80s with his self-titled debut album. But it was his third album, Cuts Like a Knife, from 1983, that propelled him to fame in the United States. The following year, Adams released Reckless, which became one of the defining albums of the decade and established him as an international superstar thanks to hits like Summer of '69, Heaven, and Run to You, to name a few. The album earned Adams his first Grammy nomination and was the best-selling of his career in America, going 5 times platinum. Adams followed it up by releasing the more socially conscious Into the Fire in 1987, but only one of the singles from the record made it into the top 10, the song Heat of the Night, which peaked at number 6, with the album selling about only a fifth of its predecessor. Needing a hit as the 90s rolled around, Adams changed things up a bit. He split from his longtime co-writer Jim Vallance in 1989. He also enlisted producer Mutt Lange, who had just come off the massive success of Def Leppard's Hysteria several years prior. As the 90s dawned, Adams was poised for even greater success. In 1991, he released the album Waking Up the Neighbors, which would contain his most iconic hit to date. But little did he know that a song which was featured on the album and also in a Hollywood blockbuster would change the course of his career and become one of the best-selling singles of all time, despite efforts from his own record label and the movie studio to sway the musician from releasing the song. While Adams was in London, finishing up work on the album with producer Mutt Lange, he was approached to write a song for the upcoming film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. The movie's composer, Michael Kamen, provided the pair with a tape of the music that he had come up with that he was supposed to use for inspiration. While some people may know Kamen for his work with Pink Floyd, Queen, and later on Metallica, that S&M album is one of my favorite records of the band. Kamen was a highly sought-after composer for Hollywood, working on the music for movies like Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, and Highlander, to name a few. Kamen gave Adams a tape of music that he'd come up with, which was about 40 or 45 minutes in length. It was all instrumental. Kamen had actually written the music years earlier, but he hadn't found anything suitable to use it for until he was hired for the Robin Hood movie. Adams latched on to the line from the movie, "I Do It For You," and that formed the basis of the song he started working on. The title of the song eventually became Everything I Do It For You. Even though the rest of the lyrics aren't specifically referencing Robin Hood, the song in reality is a generic love song. As for how quickly the song came together, Adams recalled, "It only took us about 45 minutes. We knocked it out, then we sat back to listen to it for the first time, and we looked up at one another and grinned. We knew that we had written something beautiful, but I had no idea of the impact it would have." He added, "The track originally started from a long piece of orchestration. We narrowed the theme down to the little piano intro in the beginning, and then we started writing a top line to it. Next time you check it out, notice the use of counter melodies, where the piano plays one thing and the vocal does another." Look into my eyes. Interestingly enough, Adams was not the first person approached to do the song for the film. Kamen thought the lyrics should be written from Maid Marian's perspective, and so he thought it would be fitting if a woman sang the song. Kamen's piece of music was offered to Kate Bush, Annie Lennox, and Lisa Stansfield, but they all turned it down. Well, Annie Lennox didn't turn it down. She actually said yes, but she wanted to sing it in Old English. But the production company planned on issuing it as a single, and they wanted a commercial hit, and they didn't think she'd be able to pull it off. Lennox had experience recording songs for films, most recently at the time, doing a cover of the tune Put a Little Love in Your Heart with Al Green for the 1989 film Scrooged. That song reached number 9 in the US on the Hot 100 and peaked at number 2 on the US Adult Contemporary chart. It also became a top 40 hit in several countries worldwide. It also went to number 28 in the UK for the festive season of 88-89. Lisa Stansfield, meanwhile, was blocked by her label head Clive Davis from doing the song, but it's not clear why. Before Adams was offered the song, Peter Cetera of Chicago fame was also approached to write the song, as he'd previously recorded the number 1 hit Glory of Love for the Karate Kid 2 movie. But Kamen didn't like what Cetera had come up with, recalling, "In all honesty, Cetera's was too pretty. I write sweet melodies, and sometimes they need someone to deliver them with enough authority to make sure that you don't fall asleep." Adams was then offered the job, according to Kamen, because of his rough voice, and he liked the lyrics that the musician had come up with. What you mean to me. There was going to be a strong promotional push behind the song. It was going to be issued as a single by the studio. It was also going to appear on Adams' forthcoming record, Waking Up the Neighbors. And then it was also going to, of course, appear in the new Robin Hood movie. But it was an uphill battle for the Canadian. Despite Adams and Lange's confidence in the song, not everyone was convinced of its potential. The film's production studio wasn't a fan of the track, thinking that it didn't fit with the movie's medieval theme. The studio and even Kamen suggested that Adams should maybe utilize instruments from that period like mandolins and lutes and just simply sing over them. But Adams thought it was a stupid idea, remarking, "We don't want lutes and mandolins on this. This is a pop record." Kamen did later remark about Adams, "Bryan had a lot of integrity. He's a genuine rock and roller, so there's no question of it being a sappy ballad." Adams eventually got his way, but the film studio didn't want the song prominently featured in the film, so they buried it in the end credits. Don't tell me it's not worth trying for. According to The Independent, Adams said he went to see the Robin Hood film, remarking, "The only person left in the cinema at the end was the cleaner. He thought, why did I bother? But maybe that's why so many people bought the song. They miss it in the movie." It wasn't just the movie studio that wasn't a fan of the song, as Adams' own label, A&M Records, were of the opinion that the song wasn't strong enough to be issued as a single. The label went as far as telling the musician that he'd ruin his career if he issued it as a single. They felt that given the song was a ballad, he was going to alienate his rock fan base. Adams disagreed and pushed for the label to issue it, which they did. Don't tell me it's not worth trying for. And it was issued as a single in June of 1991. And its impact was immediate and unprecedented. The song quickly climbed the charts around the world and became a global phenomenon. In the United Kingdom, the song achieved a feat that remains unmatched to this day. It spent an astounding 16 consecutive weeks at the #1 spot on the UK singles chart, setting the record for the longest unbroken run at the top. It beat the previous record in the UK that was set by Slim Whitman's single Rosemary from 1955. My Rosemary. In fact, Adams' achievement was celebrated by Whitman in November of 91 when he joined Adams on stage at Wembley Arena to sing Rosemary, after which he presented the Canadian musician with a plaque commemorating the achievement. Everything I Do It For You also topped the Europe-wide sales chart for 18 continuous weeks, still an all-time record. The song's success was equally impressive across the pond in the United States, where it held the #1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 for 7 weeks. That was the longest a song had been at #1 since The Police's Every Breath You Take, which came out 8 years prior. Every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. It was also the fastest rise for a song to reach #1 since 1985. It took Bryan Adams 5 weeks to do it, while in 1985, it took We Are the World 4 weeks. The The song's popularity also extended far beyond the English-speaking world, reaching the top of the charts in at least 16 countries. The commercial performance of Everything I Do It For You was nothing short of extraordinary. The single by itself sold over 15 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling singles of all time. The song's success helped propel Waking Up the Neighbors album to go multi-platinum in the States, selling about 4 million copies. Meanwhile, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves earned about $165 million at the domestic box office, more than any non-Terminator 2 movie in 1991. That means Prince of Thieves outgrossed The Silence of the Lambs and City Slickers, and at least in the moment, Beauty and the Beast. Kevin Costner was having a moment in his career despite people criticizing how bad his accent was in Robin Hood. Then by the mid-90s, he made Waterworld, and who can forget the video game made by Electronic Arts?
38, 39, 40 quarters. This better be good.
Game over. Please deposit 40 quarters.
What a rip!
The song's writing credits were shared by Michael Kamen, Mutt Lange, and of course Bryan Adams. It went on to win a Grammy Award for Best Song written specifically for a motion picture or television. Additionally, it earned Adams his first Academy Award nomination and Golden Globe nomination for Best Original Song. It did ultimately lose the Oscar to Beauty and the Beast from the Disney animated film of the same name. The nomination, though, cemented Adams' status as a serious contender in the world of film music. In 1993, the Irish band the Fatima Mansions recorded an interesting cover of Everything I Do It For You for a New Musical Express compilation, and that version actually went top 10 in the UK. Then in 1998, R&B artist Brandy did a cover of the song. The song's legacy extends beyond its initial release and chart success. It's since become a staple of wedding playlists and continues to be a popular choice for first dances.
Everything I do it for you.
The monumental success of the song had a profound impact on Bryan Adams' career trajectory. While he was already a successful rock artist, the song elevated him to a new level of global superstardom as he became more synonymous with adult contemporary rock. However, the song's success also led to a shift in public perception of Adams. Some critics and fans started to view him as more of a ballad writer than a rock artist that he'd been known for in the 80s. Adams himself acknowledged this change, though he maintained that wasn't what he actively pursued. Adams revealed in an interview that he was on tour at the time that the song blew up and didn't really get to enjoy its success, telling The Independent, "People were always saying you're number one in England, but I wasn't around to witness it. I was playing gigs nonstop. I was on tour literally for 4 years. So the way it changed was suddenly. I was playing a lot more places to much bigger crowds and for a lot longer tours. I don't suppose I ever really got to enjoy the surreal aspect of being number one for 4 months. I was only told about it." But in a strange twist, the Canadian government deemed that the album and all its accompanying songs were not Canadian enough. In Canada, we have a part of the government called the CRTC, or the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission. They regulate Canadian content on radio and television. The CRTC requires that TV as well as radio needs to play a certain amount of Canadian content. Even though Adams lived in Canada at the time, he paid Canadian taxes and was even given the Order of Canada 1 year prior, he wasn't Canadian enough. So what was the reason? Well, the CRTC has 4 criteria that they judge an artist against. To qualify to be considered Canadian, an artist has to meet 2 of the 4 criteria: their music, artist, lyrics, and producer. Since the album was recorded in London with an African producer and was co-written with non-Canadians, Adams only qualified for one of the 4 categories, artist. So while radio stations could play Everything I Do It For You, those plays would not be counted towards radio stations and TV channels' quota of Canadian content. Adams was pretty angry at the time, remarking, "I don't think any other country in the world would have declared their artists un-American or un-British, so for the Canadian government to consider me un-Canadian is just ridiculous."
Bryan Adams wants to do more than wake up the neighbors on his concert tour. He wants to wake up the Canadian government. Yesterday in Sydney, as he launched his national tour, he took a swing at Ottawa over Canadian content regulations.
The Canadian government should just take a step out of music business entirely. They should just get out of it. You know, they don't belong in it.
Don't tell me that we're fighting for.
The controversy is over whether Bryan Adams' music is Canadian. His last album was recorded in Britain and co-written by a British writer and composer. Even though Bryan Adams is Canadian, there isn't enough Canadian content in this album to meet the rules.
I think it's a disgrace, and I think it's really a shame that we have to deal with this kind of stupidity all the time. I mean, why can't we just deal with artists and musicians the way every other country deals with them, which is just with some respect, you know? And I just think it inhibits people. Who wants to have an international record and then be called un-Canadian or un-British? I mean, you just never hear it. There's a lot of artists that have been successful in Canada that can't get arrested anywhere else in the world, and it's because of this sort of what I think is breeding mediocrity.
In protest, Adams briefly threatened to boycott Canada's annual Juno Awards, where his album had been mostly completely ignored by the awards committee. He did end up winning Entertainer of the Year, which is voted on by the public, and Producer of the Year. Despite the controversy, Waking Up the Neighbors still went diamond in Canada, and Everything I Do It For You still topped the singles chart in Canada for 7 consecutive weeks. Due to the bad publicity the CRTC received in the whole debacle, they did overhaul their rules, but in an ironic twist, even to this day, the rule changes they made still resulted in Everything I Do It For You not being considered Canadian enough. Then we move on to controversy number 2. So Bryan Adams' name was in the news before 1991 concluded, but not for the reason he had hoped. A politician running in Louisiana for governor in 1991 named David Duke had appropriated the song for his campaign rallies. The song was played at his political rallies and was set to some slideshows before Duke took to the stage. Duke had a long checkered past with a particular hate group. As you can imagine, Adams, who was on tour at the time, was livid. In response, the Canadian musician asked all Louisiana radio stations to pull the song from their playlists until the election was over, not wanting voters to be unintentionally influenced by the song. They were also looking into legal ramifications against the Duke campaign. There really wasn't any reporting I could find after the story was initially reported, but as we've seen in so many other similar stories, I imagine a cease and desist letter was sent to the campaign. In 1993, Adams teamed up once again with Michael Kamen and Mutt Lange to write All for Love for the film The Three Musketeers. The song also features Rod Stewart and Sting. The single topped the charts worldwide. Then Adams, 2 years later, teamed up once again with Lange and Kamen to release the song Have You Ever Really Loved a Woman for the film Don Juan DeMarco. Sadly, in 1997, Kamen was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and he died at the young age of 55 in 2003 due to a heart attack. Adams reflected on the loss, comparing it to losing a brother. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again in Rock and Roll Stories. Take care.